everyone, I am the OP Creator, and welcome back to another episode. Today's episode will be on Smithereens. Smithereens, let's see, let's go. His powers. He has particle control. He can control particles that come off his body. Yes, very cool, right? Weapons. Same thing. He can change his particle things into weapons or shields or whatever he wants. It's kind of like Green Lantern, but it's particles of his own body, and they're white, so yeah. And he can fly. His weakness: time. After a certain amount of time, he can no longer control certain particles that fly away from his body. And after long enough time, he'll disappear without his time capsule, or his capsule thing that he goes into that puts him back together. His enemies, Infinicity and Mr. Mimic, are some of his enemies. This guy is also part of the team that Jash is the leader of. Jash is a character from the first episode of this show. So if you ever want to know who Jash is, you can look at him up on my channel. Okay, his superhero intelligence is 55. His healing factor is 100. His durability is a little weird, because he can kind of make himself less dense than people, because his natural state is less dense, so that if he high-fives someone, he'll lose his hand, because that's just how that goes. But he can also make it denser. If he concentrates, he can make it 10 times denser. That'll be basically all of the main information. So I'll move on to the backstory. A guy named Nick was friends with a scientist who was inventing a molecular divider. He tried this device on an apple, and it worked. It turned into a bunch of separate particles, but it didn't work like how he wanted it to. Instead of separating into its own individual molecules, it changed the molecules to where they'd be like these white things that aren't like any other kind of particle there is. And then he tried to reverse the effect, and it reformed the apple. But the apple was no longer made of what it used to be made of. It still looked the same, but not on the inside. And then, over time, particles of the apple flew off, and he couldn't recover them. And eventually the apple disappeared. So he wanted to fix this. And so he got his friend Nick to help him. But while they were trying to fix it and make it work, an explosion happened. And Nick got caught in it, exploding his body. And then he, the scientist, tried to bring him back. And it did, with the same effects as the apple. But Smithereens, since he was a conscious being, he could control his molecules. He was able to fly, make them into shapes, use them as projectiles. But if they naturally floated away from his body too far, he wouldn't be able to control them anymore. So the scientist made him a chamber that he can get into that will put him back together, and then when he gets out, he has a watch that he wears that tells him how much time he has until he has to go back in that chamber, or else he'll die. So, in other words, he was blown to Smithereens, and that's basically how Smithereens became Smithereens. I guess that does it for this episode. I will see you guys next time.